Hello there. This is a hopefully brief history on ghosts. Ghost, as defined by Oxford Dictionary, is an apparition of a dead person which is believed to appear or become manifest to the living, typically as a nebulous image. Today, we're going to learn some history on ghosts from some beliefs, historical context, and literary and media appearances. Ghosts are well known to be either the spirit or soul of a person or animal that has passed away. They are described anywhere from being faded and translucent or completely solid figures of those known to have passed. They are believed to haunt spaces, items, or people that they associated with when they were alive. Though there are accounts of people claiming to have seen animal ghosts, it is much more common for these claims to be about ghosts of people. There are a few different religious practices that are used to help the deceased rest, some of which include ritualistic magics to funeral rites and even exorcisms. These would be used to prevent ghosts or get rid of them. Ghosts, demons, and deities are all subjects, though differing when it comes to type and description, can be considered culturally universal and even predate written word around the world, and can in some instances be found in old artworks. Though depending on the culture is whether ghosts and spirits of those who have passed are seen as beings to fear or the representation of someone loved who is no longer among the living. In some cultures, ancestor worship is practiced to honor the dead. The veneration of the dead, including ancestors, is used to show love and respect to those who have passed on. This is tied to the belief of a continued existence after death, and the belief that keeping those who are gone happy in the afterlife or pleased with the living can prevent angering spirits. Some religions also believe that those who have passed may be able to help those who are still living with their problems by being a spiritual tether between the living and the spiritual realms, and can act as guides to their living relatives, if they're kept happy. The Eastern Orthodox churches and the Catholic Church take this further with saints, who are believed to act as mediators between the living and God. They pray to these saints in the hopes of the saints' greater connection to God being able to help their prayers be heard and answered. The fear of ghosts usually tends to stem from the belief that if a spirit is persisting on the material plane rather than passing on into the next, is because they have unfinished business or unable to pass on for some supernatural reason. A speculation of this is being stuck on Earth as a form of punishment, like a form of purgatory. Ghost sightings can also be seen as an ill omen, sometimes appearing before a serious event. These are usually the case when ghosts are seen in horror media that includes supernatural tones and themes. Haunted places and buildings are most well known as being places where many people died or terrible things happened, such as prisons or hospitals. Though haunted buildings or homes do not need to be associated with a violent past or tragic event to be haunted. Some people claim their homes are haunted by the ghosts of their loved ones who used to live there. People even claim to have seen loved ones who have passed in their own homes or places that the deceased didn't regularly, if ever, visit. Scientific view of ghosts. Numerous scientists dating as far back as the 1800s have argued that ghosts are little more than optical illusions, hallucinations, and simply limited human perception causing tricks to the mind. It is true that people who have experienced the loss of a loved one may see them after their death, whether in dreams or while awake. The mind is troubled by terrible griefs, and death is very difficult to accept. As for the limitations of the human mind, cited are air pressure and humidity causing changes in a house. This can cause floors to squeak and doors to fully shut when no one is in the room. There is also the phenomenon called pareidolia, where people naturally seek to create patterns where there may be none. Some skeptics believe this might be the cause of some ghost sightings. Both of these are reasons why people can feel uneasy, and it may cause them to believe that they aren't truly alone. I'm sure you've experienced something like this in your past. I know I have. Feeling creeped out at night when you're home alone and you think you see something in the corner of your eye, or hear a noise or something slightly moving in another room across your house. That tingly feeling at the base of your neck when the hairs stand on end. Then you sneak around your house, making sure there's no burglar or someone returning home earlier than expected, only to find yourself completely alone still. It can definitely be scary. Other mind made ghosts can also be created from hypnagogic hallucinations or waking dreams, where one's body is asleep but the mind is not all the way. These can lead to strange visions for those who experience it. This is also much like another source, sleep paralysis, which leads to those affected by it to see what they call ghosts or demons. I'm sure plenty of you have heard of sleep paralysis demons before, or may have even experienced them yourself. Accounts of this happening usually involves a person lying in bed and being unable to move before they see terrifying creatures or apparitions, all of which are made up by their mind and they're unable to get away from. Carbon monoxide poisoning can also cause both visual and auditory hallucinations, as well as gaps in time that could make those affected believe things are moving around on their own, despite it being done by themselves. This has led to theories about hauntings or an explanation for haunted houses as early as 1921. Carbon monoxide poisoning is super dangerous, by the way, and if you think for any reason this could be happening to you in your home, you should test for it. This is the list of symptoms on the screen currently. Always better to be safe than sorry. Ghost stories are a prominent form of storytelling that ranges across the world in various cultures, whether from oral folk tale stories or literature. These are usually meant to scare, but have been written with many narrative purposes from moral tales to comedies. Ghosts have been in literature for thousands of years, the earliest ghosts being in Homer's Odyssey and the Old Testament. A more well known ghost in literature would be Hamlet's father, the murdered king. In the English Renaissance theater, ghosts were usually seen to be wearing the same type of clothing as the living, even armor, which was usually how Hamlet's father would be depicted. This was already out of date by the time of the Renaissance and made the stage ghosts have an air of antiquity. But then the sheet ghost began to gain popularity on the stage in the 19th century because an armored ghost was no longer as spooky to theater goers and was often difficult to operate on stage, as they were usually controlled by complicated pulley systems and elevators on the stage. They were also loud and clanky. Ghosts such as these started to become mocked as they were a campy sight and thus were replaced by some form of quote unquote spirit drapery. Boo! Did I get you? That was the idea behind the new look. Definitely not as scary as they used to be, that's for sure. Now, this is where I get a little excited with the history behind ghosts. The whole reason I began researching this topic in the first place was because I had been thinking of the question, where did the sheet ghost originate from? It's cool to see when they started getting popular and seen as a more common depiction of a spirit. Sheet ghosts are now commonplace in media for children and in Halloween decorations, text emojis, and even as fun dress up photo shoot trends where the ghosts are far more fashionable. Though it is often seen as comical or cute to us now, it was genuinely considered terrifying to people until pretty recently. This depiction stems from the fact that until around the 19th century, the dead were almost always wrapped in a burial shroud. This was often the case for poorer families that could not afford to purchase a coffin. The dead would be wrapped in the bed sheets from their deathbed, which would then be tied tightly at both ends to secure the body, and then they'd be buried in it. Some old depictions of sheet ghosts include skeletons, but those seem to be left out in the later years. By the 1400s, when people reported sightings of ghosts, it was almost always described for them to be in their burial shroud. This description became so widely accepted that at one point, a group of English thieves started parading around in white sheets in order to scare and mug people. This was pretty effective, as being frightening enough to work, and the costumes worked well in concealing the thieves' identities. Though some of those thieves started getting caught, it didn't make people believe in ghosts any less. There was even a case in 1804 in London where a man named Thomas Millwood was murdered for being mistaken as a ghost. He was shot by a man named Francis Smith, who had seen Millwood dressed in his pristine, all white bricklayer's uniform, including a white apron. Smith worked as a night watchman and claimed to have been being terrorized by a spirit while working at night before the shooting had happened. At the murder trial, Millwood's wife reportedly told the court that her husband had already been mistaken as a ghost by three other people before he had been shot. She had asked him to start wearing an overcoat home, but he didn't end up doing so. Smith was found guilty of murder and sentenced to a year of hard labor. And as it turned out, the ghost that had been haunting the neighborhood and Smith was later exposed to be a local man enacting personal revenge. In my opinion, a great example of people being truly terrified of sheet ghosts. Jumping forward a bit from the Renaissance period to the Victorian and Edwardian times, we come to more classic ghost stories. Classic ghost stories were influenced by Gothic fiction and contain elements of both folklore and psychology. From this time period, one of the most famous literary ghost stories is A Christmas Carol, which included the ghosts of Christmas past, Christmas present, and Christmas future. The story, of course, being a wonderful example of ghosts being both terrifying and carrying with them moral lessons to help the main character, Ebenezer Scrooge, grow into a better person. In the modern era, from 1920 to 1970, ghost hunters became popular. People like Harry Price and Peter Underwood published stories about their experiences as true ghost stories. Children's ghost stories also began being published. Casper the Friendly Ghost was created in the 1930s as a comic series and eventually animated cartoons and a feature film in 1995. Other classic ghost stories began turning into films, and ghosts were also found on television programs, making the visage of ghosts even more commonplace, like works of Shakespeare, Dickens, and Wilde. A novel that was made into a movie at the time was The Haunting of Hill House into The Haunting in 1963. We are now moving on to postmodern depictions of ghosts. This is 1970s to the present time. At this time, ghosts were usually put into horror or romantic types of roles. They can be used to guide characters or messengers to point stories into certain directions and often have unfinished business. Some films like this are Field of Dreams and Ghost. In horror, there was The Fog and A Nightmare on Elm Street. And at this time, ghost stories in horror also began having lots of physical violence in them. The popular comedy film Ghostbusters inspired ghost hunting in more recent years, which led to numerous ghost hunting shows like Ghost Adventures, Ghost Hunters, Ghost Lab, and other like series that include ghost in the title. In the 90s, we started seeing Gothic inspired ghost stories once again, such as The Sixth Sense and the others. Both great films, by the way, and I super recommend watching both of them. In the 2000s, Asian cinema started producing some popular ghost films as well, such as The Ring. There were also popular television programs that explored ghostly topics, such as Supernatural, Ghost Whisperer, and Medium. Children's entertainment that contained ghosts also continued. Popular series from this time included again Casper the Friendly Ghost, Danny Phantom, and Scooby Doo. We've reached the end of this topic for now, at least to the point where my research ended. I ended up making this video as an excuse to go off on a study tangent. As an adult that is no longer in school, the opportunity to study a subject that I'm interested in is always there, but rarely sought out. I figured that if I did something with what I ended up wanting to study, I would feel productive. So, if you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you also found this mixed history of ghosts interesting. If you liked the video, please like and subscribe. I plan to make more spooky research videos in the future. I'd also love to hear what people may be interested in learning about, and all the more reason for me to learn about more fun subjects myself. So if you feel inclined to do so, please leave a comment. Bye!